There's an upgrade sitting on your bike right now that is almost free, that will make you faster, more comfortable, and safer all at once, and that the overwhelming majority of cyclists are getting completely wrong. It isn't a carbon wheel set, it isn't an electronic group set, it isn't a single expensive part. It's the two tires you already own and the pressure you pump into them. For decades, riders have treated this as settled. You buy the narrowest tires that fit, you pump them up rock hard, well past 100 PSI, and you feel virtuous doing it, because everyone knows that harder and narrower means faster. Except it turns out that almost everyone was wrong. The most cost-effective performance upgrade in all of cycling is the one thing most people never bother to get right, and today we're going to fix that. Because the amount of free speed, comfort, and grip you are throwing away right now every single ride is genuinely shocking once you see it. If you enjoy practical cycling advice like this, subscribe to Bike Culture so you don't miss the next video. To understand how an entire sport got this so wrong for so long, we have to go back to where the number came from, because the old belief wasn't stupid, it was just outdated. For years, the gospel was simple. Pump your tires to 100, 110, 120 PSI, and ride the skinniest tires you can find, usually 23 millimeters or less. And here's the thing, on the technology of the time, that actually made a kind of sense. Those narrow tires on the rough roads of the day genuinely needed very high pressure, because if you ran them soft, you'd smash the rim through the tire on every bump and get what riders call a pinch flat. High pressure was protection. It was the price of not puncturing. So the 100 PSI standard wasn't a myth born of stupidity. It was a real solution to a real problem. The trouble is that the problem went away and the belief didn't. Modern wider tires and tubeless setups quietly removed the entire reason for running rock hard, and yet the number, that magic 100, stubbornly survived out of pure habit. And if you're finding this useful, subscribe to Bike Culture for more cycling breakdowns and advice. So let's talk about the physics, because this is where it gets genuinely counterintuitive, and it hinges on two different ways a tire wastes your energy. The first is the one everyone knows about, called rolling resistance. That's the energy lost as the rubber of the tire squishes and deforms where it meets the ground. And on a perfectly smooth surface, the logic of the old belief holds up perfectly. Pump the tire harder, it deforms less, it wastes less energy, and it rolls faster. If the whole world were a polished indoor drum, the 100 PSI crowd would be right. But here's the catch, and it's an enormous one. The world is not a smooth drum. Real roads are rough. They have texture, cracks, chip seal, tiny bumps in every square inch. And that introduces a second, hidden way of losing energy that the old thinking completely ignored. It's called suspension loss, and once you understand it, you'll never pump your tires up blindly again. Here's how suspension loss works. When your rolling tire hits all those tiny bumps in the road, something has to absorb that impact. If the tire is soft enough, the tire itself absorbs it, flexing over the bump and smoothing it out. But if the tire is pumped up too hard, it can't flex, it's too rigid. So instead of the tire absorbing the bump, the whole bike jolts upward, and that vibration travels up through the frame, into the bars, into your hands, your arms, your whole body. And your body, all that soft tissue, absorbs the energy instead. That absorbed vibration is pure wasted energy, energy that came from your legs, and it's actively slowing you down. So on a real road, an overinflated tire gives you the worst of both worlds. You lose a little less to rolling resistance, but you lose far more to suspension loss, and the net result is that you are slower, not faster, while also being bounced half to death. The laboratory drum lied to us, precisely because it was smooth. Testing from tire engineers has shown that on rough surfaces, dropping your pressure by 10 to 20 PSI can actually reduce your total resistance by a few percent. You go faster by letting some air out. That is how backwards the old belief was. Let me make this real, because it's the kind of thing you can actually feel the moment you know to look for it. Picture two riders on the same stretch of slightly rough tarmac, the sort of chip seal surface that covers most of the roads any of us actually ride. The first rider is running the old gospel, a narrow tire pumped to 110. Watch them and you'll see the bike skittering and buzzing across the surface, the whole machine vibrating, the rider's hands going numb. And though you can't see it, every one of those vibrations is a tiny withdrawal from their energy account. The second rider, on a slightly wider tire at a sensibly lower pressure, looks almost calm by comparison. The tire is flowing over the same bumps the first rider is fighting. The bike is quiet and settled. The contact patch is glued to the road. Now, here's the part that breaks people's brains. The calm-looking rider, the comfortable one, the one who let air out, is very often the faster of the two on that surface. We have been trained to associate that harsh, buzzy, punishing feeling with speed, to think that if it hurts, it must be fast. But on a real road, that harshness isn't speed. It's the sensation of your energy being shaken out of you and thrown away. And this isn't a tiny effect that only matters to professionals. The estimates are that a huge number of everyday cyclists are riding around 15 to 25 PSI harder than they should be. Just sit with that for a second. Millions of riders on every ride are simultaneously slower, less comfortable, and gripping the road worse than they need to, all because of a number they inherited and never questioned. 3 penalties at once, and every one of them is free to fix. You don't need to buy anything. You just need to let some air out and think about what you're actually doing. And of those 3 penalties, the one nobody talks about enough is grip, because it isn't just about speed, it's about staying upright. A tire only grips the road through the small patch of rubber actually touching it, the contact patch. Pump the tire too hard and you shrink that patch, squeezing it small and tight. And you also make the tire skip and bounce over bumps instead of staying planted. That's less rubber on the road and less of the time, which is exactly the wrong thing to want when you're leaning into a wet corner or braking on a gritty descent. Drop the pressure a little and the opposite happens. The contact patch grows, the tire conforms to the surface and stays in contact with it, and grip improves noticeably, especially in the wet where it matters most. Riders often lower their pressure by a handful of PSI specifically for wet or rough conditions, for exactly this reason. So the person running rock-hard tires in the rain, thinking they're being fast, is actually giving up the grip that keeps them safe. The overinflation that slows you down is quietly making you less stable at the very moments you most need to trust your bike. If you want more videos that help you ride faster and smarter, subscribe to Bike Culture. Which brings us to width, the other half of the old belief that has been quietly overturned. For years, narrow meant fast, full stop. But the entire sport has been moving the other way, and not slowly. Riders have gone from 23mm tires to 25, to 28, to 30 and beyond. And this isn't just amateurs chasing comfort. At Paris-Roubaix, the most brutal, punishing race on the calendar, most professionals now ride tires of 28 to 30mm, many of them tubeless. These are the fastest riders in the world on the roughest roads in the sport, and they chose wide. The reason is beautiful once you see it. A wider tire can be run at lower pressure without any penalty in rolling resistance, which means you get a bigger, more comfortable contact with the road, far better grip, and dramatically less of that energy-sapping vibration, all at the same time. Pair a wide tire with a modern wide rim and the effect gets even better because the rim shape lets the tire run lower still for the same speed. Now, in the spirit of honesty this channel is built on, let me give you the important caveat, because wider is not a magic word that wins everything. At identical pressure, yes, a wider tire often rolls better because it deforms less. But once you properly adjust the pressure for each width, the gap between them narrows considerably. Tire choice is always a balance, a set of trade-offs between rolling resistance, aerodynamic drag, weight, grip, and durability. A wider tire catches slightly more wind, for instance. So this is not a story about bolting on the widest tires you can find and declaring victory. It's a story about escaping the trap of automatically choosing narrow and hard, and instead matching your tire and pressure to how and where you actually ride. And there's a hard physical limit to respect, too. Before you go wider, you must check the clearance on your frame, fork, and brakes. Rim brake bikes are often capped at around 28mm, while disc brake bikes will usually swallow much more. Try to force a tire that's too big, and you'll have it rubbing the frame, which is dangerous. Measure first. So where does tubeless fit into all of this? Because it's the other big change that made low pressure safe. A traditional tire holds an inner tube, which holds the air, and that tube is exactly what fails when you run low and pinch it against the rim. Tubeless does away with the tube entirely. The tire seals directly against the rim, and liquid sealant inside holds the air and, crucially, plugs small punctures automatically, often before you even notice them. With no tube to pinch, you can safely run 10 to 15 PSI lower than you ever could with tubes, which finally unlocks all that comfort and grip and real-world speed we've been talking about without the fear of pinch flats. And there's a bonus. Because there's no tube creating friction inside, a tubeless tire actually rolls a little faster at every pressure, a speed advantage that exists completely separately from the puncture protection. But, and this is where a lot of cycling media won't be straight with you, tubeless is not free magic. The rolling speed advantage over a good latex or lightweight TPU inner tube is real, but it's small, much smaller than the marketing would have you believe. Tubeless can be messy and fiddly to set up. The sealant dries out and needs topping up every few months, and occasionally it can burp air or refuse to seal cleanly. For a rider on rough roads, gravel, or long adventures who hates flats, tubeless is a genuine upgrade that's well worth the hassle. But for someone riding mostly smooth roads who value simplicity, a modern tire with a good latex or TPU tube is still an excellent, fast, low-maintenance choice. Tubeless is a tool, not a religion. And before you go, subscribe to Bike Culture for more practical cycling tips like this one. So let's turn all of this into something you can actually do this weekend, because the beauty of this upgrade is that most of it costs nothing. Start with pressure, and start with what's called sag. Under your weight, a tire should compress by roughly 15% of its height. Too hard and it barely moves and you bounce. Too soft and it squirms and risks pinching. Next, and almost nobody does this, run your front tires softer than your rear by around 5 to 10%. Your weight sits roughly 40% front, 60% rear, so matching the pressures actually overloads the front and costs you grip and comfort. Then adjust for reality. Heavier rider or narrower tire, add a little pressure.
Wider tire, rougher road, or wet weather takes them out. Running tubeless, drop another 10 or 15. Take a sensible starting number for your width, then let out 2 or 3 PSI at a time and ride it until the bike feels both fast and planted underneath you. And do yourself one favor. Buy a proper digital pressure gauge, because the cheap gauge built into your pump is very probably lying to you, and you can't dial in something you can't measure. One last thing that catches everyone out. Cold air lowers your pressure by around 2 PSI for every 10 degrees the temperature drops, so check before you ride, not once a week. So here's where we land, a long way from that old number stamped into cycling's memory. The single most valuable upgrade on your bike is not the one in the shop window with the 4-figure price tag. It's the rubber already bolted to your wheels and the air you've been mindlessly overfilling for years. Harder was never automatically faster. Narrower was never automatically better. Those beliefs were sensible answers to problems that modern tires and tubeless quietly solved, and clinging to them now is costing you speed, comfort, and grip on every single ride, for free. So before you spend a fortune chasing marginal gains on carbon and electronics, go and get the cheapest upgrade in all of cycling exactly right. Let some air out. Consider going a little wider. Measure what you're actually running. Because the fastest, most comfortable version of your current bike might be sitting right there in your garage already, waiting for you to stop pumping your tires up like it's still 1995 and simply let it breathe.